Let's see the fifth question. There are many water-stressed countries in the world, mostly in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. Water-stressed countries have a shortage of fresh water needed for humans, animals, and crops. So fresh water can be produced from seawater by desalination process. The map shows the most water-stressed countries, which are the shaded ones. So first question is, which is the structure of a water molecule? Water molecule consists of an oxygen atom and two hydrogen atoms. Okay, and the oxygen atom is slightly negative and the hydrogen atom is slightly positive. So you can easily eliminate A and also what? D. And it should have two hydrogen molecules, so B is also eliminated. So you can easily understand C is the option. So let's move on to the next question. Estimate of the volume of water on Earth is 1.4 into 10 to the power 12 kilometer cube. Fresh water makes up 2.5 of this volume. 90% of this fresh water is not available as it is frozen in ice caps and glaciers. Calculate the volume of available fresh water. So you know that according to the data given, you can understand that 90% is not available means how many percent is available? So which is 10%, right? So 10% of fresh water is available. And in the total volume of the water, only 2.5 of this volume is fresh water. So total volume is this, fresh water is 2.5%, and among that 10% is still available. So you have to multiply all those three values, not 90, should be 10. So you can easily write the answer as 1.4 times 10 to the power 10 to the power 12. Then you can multiply it by 2.5, then divide by 100. Then you have to put 10%. So 10 divided by 100. So you will get the answer as what? 3.5 into 10 to the power 9. So this is the answer that you will get. They have already written the units, so you don't have to write it again. So let's move on to the next question. The global demand for water is expected to rise up to about 6,000 kilometer cube by 2050. Suggest one reason for an increase in the global demand. Because of the increase in human population. So you can easily write due to increase in human population, what will happen? The usage of water will be more demanding, right? So overuse and depletion of natural resources taking place. So you can easily write the increase in human population as the only answer. You don't need to explain because it is only 1 mark question. So that is due to increase in human population. Okay. So let's move on to the next question. D part. Seawater is a salt solution. Salt has a positively charged sodium ions and negatively charged chloride ions. Explain why salt can dissolve in water. So in the water molecule, you have one oxygen atom and then two hydrogen atoms, right? So oxygen is what? A slightly negative atom, and hydrogen are slightly positive atom. So in the NaCl molecule, Na plus and Cl minus are there. So Na plus and Cl minus are there in the NaCl molecule. Na plus is positive, so it is getting attracted to oxygen because oxygen is negative. So you will have Na plus here. And with the hydrogen, the Cl minus will be binding on. So Na plus is positive, is binding to the opposite charge, which is negative oxygen, and Cl minus is to the hydrogen. So here also you will get the Cl minus. Okay, so you are asked to explain why salt can dissolve in water. So you can easily write the answer as what? So water is a polar molecule and it has uneven charge distribution. where the sodium ions will be attracted to the oxygen atom and the chlorine ions will be attracted to the hydrogen atom. So write it as water is a polar molecule. That's the first point. Then it has uneven charge distribution. You can also write it as the oxygen is slightly negative and the hydrogen is slightly positive. And then you can write the sodium ion will be attracted to oxygen, and chloride ion will be attracted to hydrogen. Okay, so these is the points that you have to mention. So let's move on to the next question. One method of desalination is forward osmosis desalination using a hydrogel. Hydrogels are made up of large molecules that can absorb water because they have low water potential. So low water potential means what? They have high solute potential. The diagram shows the process of forward osmosis desalination, and you are given the step. The seawater enters first. It is partially permeable through the partially permeable membrane. It is get diluted. Then it is producing fresh water. Concentrated hydrogen will again return, and with reverse osmosis, the waste liquid leaves. So, according to the question, explain how forward osmosis desalination produces for fresh water. So, use the information in the diagram. So, write like this: water passes by osmosis. So, you know what is osmosis, right? From higher concentration to a lower concentration, water will pass. So, into the hydrogel because the water potential of seawater is greater. But the sodium ions, what will happen to the sodium ions? Sodium chloride ions. But the sodium chloride ions cannot pass through the partially permeable membrane. Then the fresh water is separated. So then splashing of H plus happens. What is splashing of H plus means what? What will it do? That means it is reducing the water potential. So low water potential. So only these points you have to write. So you are asked to write about only the forward osmosis, not the reverse one. So water passes by osmosis into the hydrogel because the water potential seawater is greater, but NaCl ions cannot pass through the partially permeable membrane because they are larger molecules, so they cannot pass through the partially permeable membrane. Then the fresh water is separated and the hydrogel will remain as a particles. Then splashing of H plus will result in lower water potential. So that's all you have to write for the DE part. So that's all about fifth question.